Thanks for the introductory session. Now, as I have been introduced, myself, Dr. Varun Sharma, and I'm working in the area of additive manufacturing. The topic of discussion for the today's session that I have put is that is additive manufacturing techniques for the product development. So when we talk about the additive manufacturing, then there are two terms that comes up into picture. One is what basically is additive manufacturing, and the second term is what is rapid prototyping techniques. Now, uh, rapid prototyping is basically a wider umbrella which refers to all those processes and all those methods which helps in creating up a prototype. Sorry. When we talk about the prototype, we talk about the miniaturized version of an actual product. So many a times, whenever any product is actually coming up into the real existence, it has to go to through several stages before it is being launched up into the market. So before that product is being launched up into the market, before that particular thing, what we do is we do not go for the actual scale production of the product, but what we go is we go for the prototyping manufacturing. Now there are different ways of manufacturing up a prototype. Now the prototype can be manufactured depending upon the work material. Like let us say that if I am manufacturing up a prototype of wood. I may require up a skilled craftsman. He can manufacture up a prototype of wood. If I'm working for prototype of plastic, I may use certain additive manufacturing techniques. A prototype is being fabricated. Similarly, a prototype can be fabricated of a paper also. So all those techniques which help in fabrication of that particular prototype in a rapid manner, those prototyping techniques are called as rapid prototyping manufacturing methods. Now, it can be a CNC machine, it can be an investment casting, or it can be also an additive manufacturing technique. Now, those additive manufacturing techniques, those additive manufacturing techniques that, which are used for the prototyping manufacturing, they refers to the digital CAD design. They refer to the digital CAD design that we want to create up. Now, if we are actually fabricating up that particular prototype using any particular digital means, digital means, I mean to say that you have integrated your machine with the computer and you are actually fabricating up that particular prototype through a computer screen. Now, there are two different kinds of models that we generally talk of. Now, one model is called as a soft model, and the other model is called as a. Now, those soft models and the hard models that we come up into picture. Soft model is that particular model which you can visualize on your computer screen. Whereas a hard model is that particular model which is in front of you and you can feel that particular model. Now, all those methods by which you can create up a soft model into a hard model that is there on your computer screen to an actual product. Now, all those methods are called as the additive manufacturing methods. So what is AM? AM basically refers to the process of converting up a digital 3D design model by manufacturing that particular product in a layer by layer manner. So it is actually the stacking of number of layers one over the other to manufacture that particular product. Now, when we talk about these all techniques, now it was not in a day that you started manufacturing up your prototype in a day or two. No. Now, when we talk about these additive manufacturing, it requires a lot of inventions coming together in on a single platform. Now, in all the additive manufacturing techniques, all the rapid prototyping techniques that we are using at present, they require some distinct inventions somewhere in some part of the world. For example, we require a mechanization, we require certain computers, we require certain NC machines, we require certain robots, we require certain lasers, so which were independently incepted somewhere around 46, 52, 61. And when we talk about the soft model, we require up certain solid modular techniques. So the CAD was being invented in 63. So when all these things amalgamated and they were brought on a single platform, it was in 88 when a first rapid prototyping system was being fabricated. Now that prototyping system was an SLA. That was one of the technique of fabricating that particular prototype in a rapid manner. So this particular process is basically called as what you see is what you build process. So if you are seeing anything in this particular nature and you have the capability of converting that object into a soft model on a computer screen, then you can virtually prototype any particular thing in this world. You can actually manufacture any particular thing in this world using any particular additive manufacturing technique. So it is what you see is what you build. But once you see that particular thing, you must have the capability of converting up a soft model. So what I require? I required SolidWorks, I required Proe, CATIA, number of solid modular techniques are there. I should have a very good hand over it. Only then I can fabricate any particular soft model on a computer screen. But even if you are not that good in design, fine, you cannot design any intrinsic products which you see in your day-to-day life. Let us say if you want to create any natural object, fine. Now nature has a different creativity. Nature has its own rules and it has its own equations that you cannot mathematically define. You cannot define that this is a spherical or this is a circular object. It may have a very free form surface which is away from your descriptive mathematical equations. Fine. So when it comes to the natural objects, then it is not the requirement of the designer to actually convert it into a soft model. We may require certain other additional methods to manufacture that particular product. For example, over here there are four different things. The first one is the prototype of a skull. Now you can see over here two different colors. One is the white colored portion and the other one is this golden colored portion. Fine. So what happened with this particular case is that a person met up with a head injury and some portion which is being shown over here with this golden color that was missing from his head. Fine. Now the doctors, what they wanted to do is to provide up the actual profile of his head. They want to retrofit this onto his particular skull. Now, this is the case of a scaffold, a porous architecture, fine, through holes from one end to the other end, from top to the bottom, from side to the other side. So when we talk about these particular products, these are also having very intrinsic shapes. Fine. That is not very easy for a designer to design. Now, this was a case of a pelvic caudal. Now, over here, what happened is that because of certain operation issues and all, some part of this pelvic caudal of the human being was being dissolved. Fine. He or she was not able to sit properly. So the portion that you can see up with this gray colored portion that was missing. So what I need to do is if I have to fabricate it, first I need to develop up a CAD model. I need to develop up a soft model. So when it comes to development of a soft model, how to develop? Now it is very difficult. You cannot measure all these things with the help of a vernier caliper or a micrometer or with a scale or something. It is very difficult to measure these natural objects. Fine. Now there comes up certain other techniques which we call as the reverse engineering, CT scan data, MRI data. I'll be taking up it in the next forthcoming slides. So if I want to prototype any particular thing using an additive manufacturing technique, then if I'm able to see it either on missing part of a human body or in front of you, then you have to create up that soft model. Only then you can build up that particular process. So this is a case of a cup that has been shown. So if you look to this particular cup, there could be a number of ways of manufacturing this particular cup. Now you can manufacture the cup using a lathe machine also, using sheet metal also, using casting also. You can manufacture the same product using additive manufacturing also. So when it comes to how to fabricate up a prototype, fine, you have, there will be a numerous applications in front of you. You can fabricate with A also, B also, C also, D also. But when to go for additive manufacturing? It is not always advisable that always go for an additive manufacturing or a 3D printing to fabricate this particular prototype. No, there has to be certain rules which should govern us, that when I should go for the manufacturing of this particular additive manufacturing product. Now, the most important thing of the selection of the additive manufacturing is time and the material that I want to process. Fine. Now, if this material of this cup is, let us say, steel, fine, then manufacturing it using an additive manufacturing route will be a costlier affair. Fine. But if the same cup is made up of titanium, which is a costly material. Now, whenever you go for machining and all those processes are called as the subtractive manufacturing processes. The material is being taken up in the form of chips, and those chips are not useful. You have to throw away that particular chips. Now, manufacturing of a product using a subtractive manufacturing material method, let us say of titanium, will result in a large amount of wastage. The wastage will be in the form of formation of this particular cavity. The wastage will be in terms of creation of these particular C-shaped profile. So because of the numerous wastages that are being involved with the conventional subtractive manufacturing methods, that can all be eradicated by using up any particular additive manufacturing method. Fine. So it is not only the time, it is not only the cost, but it is also an important consideration that has to be kept in mind, that why additive manufacturing should be used to manufacture this particular product. So the idea of this additive manufacturing came up in the beginning of 88 when this technique was being evolved. Now, what happened is, as you look to your day-to-day product that you are using nowadays, they are very miniaturized. They are very much smaller in size. Fine. Now, as the things become more and more smaller, fine, the complexity of the product is increased by many folds. You might have heard about the scaling laws. Fine. So if you create a very smaller product, fine, it requires a large amount of investment into it. Fine. Because if you are creating up a 10 hole, it is easy. Creation of a 1 micron hole is difficult, because you have to invest that much into your machines that it is rigid enough that it can create that smaller holes in that particular product. So as the time passed from 70s to 95 to present 2020, what you can see is that the relative product complexity has increased manyfold. And this is the relative product complexity from 70s to 1995. You can see that the products are becoming more and more smaller, and the manufacturing of that particular prototype is very, very much costly. So that cannot be done. So at the same side, what you can see is that, just a sec. Just a sec, please. Yeah. So as the product complexity increased manifold, the idea of manufacturing of the prototype came up into existence. So in the early 70s or in the late 70s, the conventional prototyping materials and the methods were different. Now we used to manufacture that particular prototype using wood or wax patterns and all. But around 80s to the mid of 80s, what happened is there were certain scanning NC machine, CNC machine, which were helpful in manufacturing of that particular prototype. Now, around 88, we had our first additive manufacturing method, and we used SLA, SLS, FDM, LOM, SGC. These are all additive manufacturing processes that came up into existence. Now, as the complexity increased, fine, the project completion time has to be taken up into consideration, because if there are two companies fighting for a product into the market, only that company will win which will be able to bring up its product into the market at a faster pace. So the prototype manufacturing and the prototyping testing, these all has to be done in a very concurrent manner. So we came across something called as a concurrent engineering, where everyone, designer, shop floor manager, the foreman, everyone sat on a single table, so that the prototyping manufacturing is being fastened and we can deliver the product into the market at a very less time, in a very less time, at an affordable cost and all. So concurrent engineering came up into existence. So what happened is, earlier the wood manufacturing was being used to manufacture up the prototype, and it took around 16 weeks to manufacture up the prototype. Now, if the product complexity has increased, the prototyping manufacturing would also increase, but manyfold. Now, what happened is, what we found is that the prototyping manufacturing started decreasing with the help of 2D, 3D, CNC parts and all. But when there was a further shoot in the product complexity, we moved to SLA, SLS, FDM, SGC, LOM, and all. And we were able to create up the prototype in just 3 weeks, even with a higher complexity in that particular product. So, if you talk about the present day scenarios, we can virtually prototype any particular product of any particular material of any particular complexity, even in less than a day. So, if you look to 1995 to 2020 and so, we can prototype any particular product in less than a day. So the benefits of integration of all these things, manufacturing using an additive manufacturing technique, manufacturing using a concurrent engineering approach, what they did? What was the dividend that it gave to us? The dividend that was provided to us was in the term of reduction in the cost and the time to manufacture that particular product. So what happened is, this was your conventional product manufacturing route. Now, with the integration of an RP model or an additive manufacturing model, you were able to reduce the cost by 10 to 50%, and also your time was also being decreased in the same order or in the same fashion. So the food of the additive manufacturing, I always say that food is in the term of a soft model. Now that soft model is being stored up in the form of a de facto standard worldwide that has been used across the globe, and that standard is called as an STL file, standard tessellation language. Fine. Now, this is the STL file on which most of the additive manufacturing processes work. Now, to convert this as a .stl file, what you require? A soft model. How can you develop up a soft model? You can develop up that particular soft model using a 3D CAD, using any particular SolidWorks, Pro E, CATIA. You can develop up a 3D CAD, just save as a .stl format. You're not good in design, no problem. You design its top view, front view, side view, isometric view, club all those views. From 2D drawings, you convert up into a 3D CAD model and then convert up into a .stl format. Fine. Now, create up an STL file of a Qutub Minar. Fine. There is no 3D modeler that can invent it. It's very complicated design. There is no 2D drawing that was being available to me of Qutub Minar. I cannot do it. So there is another way of converting that particular model into a STL, and that is called as a reverse engineering. That is retrieving the 3D model in a reverse manner. Like we do scanning, we do reverse engineering, and then we develop up the model. So that is from the point cloud data, going for the reverse engineering and getting up a 3D CAD model. Good. But the examples that I showed you over earlier, like of the pelvic caudal, of the brain and all, now over there what we do is we take the use of an MRI or a CT scan data to convert it into a 3D construction and then save it as a .stl file. So whether you are working for any biomedical product, any natural product, or any artificial product that you want to manufacture, you have to either go for 3D to STL, 2D to 3D to STL, point cloud to 3D to STL, MRI to 3D to STL. You have to land up over here in the STL file, and then the process is very easy. Rather than the process is more or less uniform, whether you are working with FDM, SLA, SLS, Loom, or any particular process. So we have to come to this particular STL, and then we have to go to the actual hardware of that particular machine. So as the topic is how to design, fine, how to design. So we will try to understand how to generate from a point cloud data to an STL, how to generate up an STL from a 3D CAD, and then we will be discussing up any one particular method of manufacturing that particular product. So the typical areas in which this additive manufacturing has dived up is wherever you see this technique is there. No doubt, this technique has not gone for the actual full scale production because of numerous limitations in terms of cost, in terms of materials, in terms of patents that has been filed and all. But still, now this particular technique is used for either a batch production or for a customized manufacturing. This technique is being there. So if you go for the designing, for marketing, for the proof of concept, for visualizing, so additive manufacturing techniques are being there in aerospace sector, in automotive sector, in biomedical, in jewelry, in consumer electronics. So everywhere this particular process is being used. So this is the current and the future of the additive manufacturing, from the aerospace sectors to furnitures to jewelries to textiles to toys collections, from sports equipment, even food, and even your houses nowadays are being additively manufactured. So I will be taking up certain case studies to just to give you the inference that how the design integration with the additive manufacturing has paved up the path of a new area of the manufacturing domain in the present scenario. So this is one of the example that I always take up. That is the example of the steel buckle. Now, whenever we go on an aeroplane, the first thing that we hear is kindly fasten up your buckles. Fine, fasten up your seats. So conventionally, there was a steel buckle that was used for buckling up the seats, and this buckle was made up of material that was steel, and each buckle weighed around 155 grams. Fine. Then, because of this 155 grams of a single buckle, and that too made up of steel, fine. The aerospace companies came up into existence. Let us try to have more dividends. Let us try to have more profit when we are flying from one country to the other. So if there has to be more dividends or the more profit, what they have to do? They have to reduce their fuel consumption. Now, if they have to reduce their fuel consumption, what they have to do? They have to reduce the weight of their aeroplane. Now, you cannot reduce the weight of the wings of the aeroplane because they have already been optimized. Fine, composite materials are being used and all. They're already very light, but I do not find up any further way to reduce the weight of that particular aeroplane. But what I can do is I can work on the interiors then. Now, when they came up to the interior, the first thing that they saw is this steel buckle which weighed around 155 grams. They said that let us try to reduce the weight of this particular buckle. Very simple example. Now, what they did is they tried to create a perforated buckle. Fine, like was having certain holes, light in weight, and all. Fine. Now they said that why to manufacture it of steel? Let us try to manufacture it of titanium. Now, titanium cost is around 3,000 or 3,200 per kg. Fine. You cannot use any particular conventional subtractive manufacturing methods to manufacture it, because wherever you are creating up perforations, wherever there is milling or turning and all, it is going to reduce or it is going to result in a large amount of wastage of the material that has to be scrapped, that has to be thrown away. Fine. So I cannot use up the conventional methods. So they said that let us try to manufacture this particular prototype of a steel buckle of titanium having certain perforations. Let us use an additive manufacturing techniques, and they started using SLS. Fine. Now, when they manufactured it, each buckle of titanium weighed around 70 grams. It means from 155 grams, they were able to get 70 grams, means an average reduction of 55% over a single buckle. Now, if you look to an aeroplane, Airbus 380, which has 853 seats, every seat has that buckle. Now, if I'm able to reduce it, I'm able to reduce 72 kg. Just a small design consideration and a small change in the outlook of that particular product, change in the manufacturing method, you were able to reduce 72 kg of the aeroplane. This weight is very much when you look to an aeroplane, and this reduction resulted in saving of 2 million euros in a year, resulting in a saving of 45,000 liters per kg. Fine. So with this amount of the reduction, no doubt they are investing at present in additive manufacturing, in titanium. It is at present, but the repay period that that company is going to have 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line is so enormous that it is going to, or it is bound to get up the profit in a longer duration. So additive manufacturing, that I always say that no doubt it is an investment at present, but 10 years down the line, this investment is going to give you more profits or more dividends. The other area is related to the product complexity. Nowadays, people are working for uh, fluidic channels. Fine, they are working for very capillary motion. They're creating in a very smaller surfaces and all. Fine. So when you talk about the complexity, for the conventional manufacturing, the cost is increasing in an exponential manner. Fine. It is increasing at a very faster pace. It is a very steep. Creation of a 10 mm hole and creation of a 1 micron hole may require an altogether different machine, rigid machines. Fine. The tooling cost, vibrations and all that has to be dampened up and all. So the conventional manufacturing cost is very huge, very large when we talk about the increase in the complexity of that particular product. But when you talk about the additive manufacturing, provided you work within the specifications of that particular machines, there is no extra cost that you need to invest. No, there is no tooling cost, not at all. There is no tool over here, rather. It is a tool less manufacturing. It's a free form manufacturing. There is no tooling cost involved. Now, because of that no tooling cost, it is a parallel to the complexity. No doubt there is this amount is a fixed cost, but there is no variable cost as such when we talk about the additive manufacturing to fabricate up the prototype. The other area of the additive manufacturing is in the medical sector. Now, when we go for a dentist to fit up an extra or fit up the teeth, what he has to do, he has to take up the impression of our jaw so that he can fit up that particular teeth in a very nice and in a very accurate manner. Fine. Now, many times going to the dentist is not a single day job, but a very frequent visiting to the dentist has to be made up so that he can actually fit up that particular teeth in a nice and in a right location. Now, there is where additive manufacturing has come up. Now, in the manufacturing of these crowns and bristles and all, there are about 30 million crowns that have been additively manufactured using this MRI and CT scan data, which actually retrofits in that particular person, because here is what a customization is being required. So in the implants, in dental crowns and bridges, so this is where the conventional manufacturing methods have been eradicated and additive manufacturing has been there. Now it is also into the customization. Now customization can be of your day-to-day product. Fine. Now this is the case of the United States of America, where they are actually manufacturing the toothbrush at their home. So they have their home 3D printer, a toothbrush is being broken, they do its 3D scanning, whatever shape, hardness, color, style, shape they want, they customize it on a home 3D printer and a new toothbrush is being ready. Fine. The other area of the additive manufacturing is in the manufacturing of your buildings. Fine. This was a case of USA. At present, we are having it in Chennai also. L&T has started it. So what they are doing is they are manufacturing up the home in a layer by layer manner. Now you can see over here the stacking of the cements. 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer, 4 layer. So they stack the layer of cement onto a particular platform, which can be taken from one location to the other location. And in less than a day, a home is being ready. So additive manufacturing has also dived up into the building sector, where we will be seeing it more often 5 years down the line. It is also available in the pharmaceutical sector, in which additive manufacturing has come up. Now, many a times it depends upon the age, sex of that particular person, the what kind of a dosage is being prescribed. Sometimes a full dosage is being prescribed, sometimes a half dosage is being prescribed, sometimes a multiple dosages are being prescribed to that particular person to get rid of any particular ailment and all. So many a times the conventional manufacturing method of the tablet manufacturing was not that easy. So it means that it is not always having up a uniform composition. So if it is a 500 mg drug, it is never so 250 mg will be on one half and 250 mg will be on another half. Never at all. Fine. Because it is generally a compressing kind of a thing which helps in manufacturing of that particular tablet. So if you are giving half of it, there are very good chances that you are either giving up an underdose or an overdose to that particular person. So to get rid of it, the European Union has prescribed up the use of the 3D printers at the hospitals or at the pharmacy to dispense up the tablets to the. So it results in something called as a personalized drug delivery. So it depends from one person to the other person, and this drug delivery can be there. So whether we talk about the pharmaceutical sector, building manufacturing, customization, we have to select any particular prototyping methodology to create that particular product. What you see is what you build, how to build it. So that depends upon the material that I'm going to stack. I'm going to create up a layer. Now that building of or the stacking of the layer can be in the form of powder materials, stacking in the form of powders, stacking in the form of liquids that are there, or stacking in the form of certain solid materials. So if I'm stacking it in the form of powders, there are numerous methodologies. We have selective laser sintering. If it is in the form of liquid, we have stereolithography. If it is in the form of solids, we have laminated object manufacturing. So the idea remains the same. The first and the foremost thing is give me an STL and I give you the fine. So what is going to be the material inflow, whether it is in the form of liquid, powders, or in the solid, I can select up the additive manufacturing technique. The flow chart remains the same. So you create up a soft model on the computer screen. convert that particular soft model into a tessellation. So what is tessellation? Tessellation is the first approximation that I am doing. Now mind that whenever we go for the additive manufacturing, it is not the actual product that has been manufactured. No, it is not the actual product. It is certain approximated model. When we talk about the approximated model, the first approximation starts with the tessellation. So what we do is just on the exteriors, nothing to do with the interiors. Just on the outside periphery of that particular object, what you do is you create up a number of triangles. Now, why triangles? How to do triangulation? We will discuss. So the first thing is you create up a triangulation. You create up a tessellated model. Mind it, this is your actual model, and this model is called as a tessellated model or the first approximated model. So once you have done the tessellation, because you are working, you are fabricating up a 3D object by stacking 2D layers. So what you do is the next step that is there, that is called as a slicing. Now what does this slicing do? Slicing gives you the information on a 2D platform. Now one layer on a 2D, next layer on a 2D, third layer on a 2D. Once they are stacked, you get up the object in the 3 dimensions. So stacking of 2D layers. So where to do the stacking? That is being differentiated with the slicing. Now once you do the slicing, you generate up the part. Fine. This is the STL. The food is ready. Now give it to the machine. Now, when you do the slicing, you define up the path that this is the boundary in which my laser has to 3D print the object. You start moving it, your part is ready. Start moving it, second layer is ready. Third layer is ready. So once all the layers have been ready, from the RP system, you get up the product. So if there is a requirement of any post processing, you are not happy with the surface finish, fine. You do any kind of a post processing, test that particular prototype. If the prototype is fine, go for a full scale production or go for the market launch of your product. If there are certain drawbacks, again follow the same rule. Go for a 3D CAD, go for the tessellation, go for the slicing, and again follow the same particular path flow. So the first approximation that comes up over here is called as the tessellated model. So see, this is your spherical object. Once you approximate it with the triangles, now what you can see is that this is the outermost periphery that is circular in shape. But once you do its tessellation, there will be certain edges. Now the difference between the edge of the triangle and the surface of the sphere, that difference is called as a caudal tolerance. Because it is an approximation. So if I want to reduce this caudal tolerance, what I can do is I can have very fine triangles. Now see what has happened over here. Now from this particular mechanical object that you can see is that the triangles were very coarse. The triangles were very larger in shape. Now when they were in very larger shape, there was more caudal tolerance. Now I did its very fine triangle. I did a further fine triangle. Now, when I did a further fine triangles, the variation of the difference between the surface of that particular sphere and the surface of that particular triangle will be very, very fine. And that variation that we call as the caudal tolerances has been reduced. So smaller or more number of triangle means a closer approximation of the curved surface. So once you have done a dot STL, it's very easy. So you design a part on a SolidWorks Pro CATIA. On the save as option, just save it as an STL. There is a drop down menu. Save it as OBJ, STL, ASCII for binary format and all. There is one format called as a STL format. Now that STL formats stores up this particular information in this particular format. So it is a triangle. So to define up a triangle, what I require 3 vertices. I require the vertices 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 2, 1, 0, 2 and all. So what I require is I require these 3 vertices and I require up a unit normal to that particular thing. So many times I have been asked, why tessellation? Why not a rhombus? Because if you are moving anything above three-sided face, you have to store more information. So if it is a quadrilateral, rhombus, pentagon, hexagon, there will be four vertices, 5, 6, 7, and all. It is only triangle is the least two-dimensional object which requires the minimum amount of storage. So that is why it is a triangulated. It is not pentagon. Fine. So what you can see is that this is how the information is being stored up in your tessellated model. It stores up the information of vertex 1, vertex 2, vertex 3, and a unit norm. So why unit normal is being required? Because it helps in deciding up the path of your particular laser. So if it is an object and every laser is being pointed towards your computer screen and all, it means that it is going to give me a profile. So there are numerous amounts of errors that are being encountered in the tessellation. Now that numerous errors are in the terms of that if I'm talking about any particular solid model, it should be having up a uniform triangulation. There should not be any gap. There should not be overlapping triangles. There should be a unique triangle. So numerous amounts of errors occur when we go for this tessellation. That is one of the reason many a times people say that additive manufacturing is a slow process because we do not have that much robust softwares as of now also, which can give up an STL file which is an error free, which is robust. So if you are actually creating up a solid model, it is easy using a ProE, KTI and all. But once I say to you, create up an STL file of a Qutub Minar, fine. You cannot draw it on SolidWorks. No, not at all. Fine. You are not having the 2D drawings which the Mughals have made it, not at all. But what you can do is you can go for a 3D scanning. You can go for a reverse engineering. So once you go for a reverse engineering, if you look to that particular slide, the reverse engineering over here starts with a point cloud data. So I will be having a numerous amount of points. And with the help of those particular points, I have to create up a cloud. And that cloud is going to define up the boundary of that particular object. So how to create up a bounded through those particular points, that technique is called as a reverse engineering. So when we talk about the reverse engineering, now see, there are these all points are there. Fine, these all points are there. So I can create up the bounded region like this also. I can create up a bounded region like this also of the same set of points. But whenever given up a chance, always create up the polygon because you are working with the numerous number of edges. Always create up a polygon which is a convex polygon. Never go. Now we are talking about the design considerations. We are designing up an object and that too using a point cloud data. Yeah, are you there with me? Is it fine till this particular point? You can just type up in the chat box. Are you there with me till this point? Because I can't see anyone. Hello?
Yes, sir. Everything is okay.
Okay, fine. So there are two ways of creating up a polygon. You can create up a yes, please. Hello. Okay. There are two ways of creating up a polygon. You can create up a concave polygon also, and you can create up a convex polygon also. So how to differentiate these two polygons? Now see, if I take any 2 points in this particular polygon, 1 point, second point, and join them with a straight line. What you can see is that whole of the line is lying inside the bound of that particular polygon. Good. Now, if I take up one point over here, another point over here, and join them with a straight line, what I will see is that some portion, like this portion is lying inside the bound of the polygon, and there will be some portion of the line which will be lying outside that particular polygon. So if this kind of a situation arises, now that kind of the polygon is called as a concave polygon. Then some portion of a straight line joining any 2 points lies outside the polygon, that we call is a concave polygon. Now, if you take any 2 points over here in this particular polygon, 1 point, these 2 points, join them with a straight line. Anywhere you take, whole of the line is going to lie inside the polygon. Now that is called as a convex polygon. Now, the algorithm that we are going to discuss over here is that will be in such a manner that you are going to get up a convex polygon always. Now, to get up this particular convex polygon, there is one beautiful scanning methodology that is called as a Graham's scan methodology. Now, what does this Graham scan methodology say is that Graham scan methodology says that follow a 3-step method. Now, what is that 3-step method? Start up a point which is having the minimum y value. Start up the point which is having the minimum y value. So you have to define up your coordinate system, and from a numerous points that you have got up from a 3D scanner, take that particular point which is having the minimum y value. The second one is with respect to that particular point which you have selected in step number 1, arrange all the points in the increasing order of their polar angles. Right? Starting from acute to obtuse, arrange all the points in the increasing order of their polar angles. Third step is start moving from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Start moving. And when you move, wherever you make up a left turn, that is a good turn. Wherever you make up a right turn, drop that particular point. So left turn is going to be a good turn. Right turn is going to be a bad turn. Let us try to do it. Let us say these are all my points that I have got up from a 3D scanning of a Qutub Minar. Fine. The first step is select up the point which is having the minimum y value. For that, I have to define my origin. Let us say this is my origin. Now, which point is having the minimum y value? This point is having the minimum y value. This is the point which is having the minimum y value. Now, with respect to this particular point, arrange all the points in the increasing order of their polar angles. Start measuring the angles. Now, this is your acute angle. If you talk about this particular angle, this is the obtuse angle. So with respect to your first point, arrange all the points in the increasing order of their polar angles. Good. Number them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In other words, the point number 7 is making an obtuse angle. Point number 1 is making an acute angle. Numbered all the points. Now start moving from your 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Wherever you will make up a left turn, good turn. Wherever you make up a right turn, that's a bad turn. That's not a good turn at all. So I start moving from 0. Let us say mark this as 0. From 0, move to 1. When you are at 1, you are over here. This is your position. You have to move from 1 to 2. You will be making up a turn. You are making up a turn in which direction? You are making up a turn in left direction. Left is a good turn. Fine. Now you are at 2. You are at this particular point. You have to move towards which point? 3. You are making up a turn in this direction. Which turn it is? Left turn. Good turn. You are at 3. You have to move towards 4. You are at 3. You have to move towards 4. It is again a left turn. But once you are at point number 4, you are at here. You have to move towards 5. which turn you will be making? You will be making up a right turn. Right turn is a bad turn shown by a red line. If it is a bad turn, what you have to do is you have to skip the preceding point. Skip this particular point. Skip point 4. Assume there is no point 4. You have to move from the preceding point. Let us say you are at 3. Once you are at 3, you have to move towards 5. Which turn you are making? You are again making up a right turn, bad turn. If it is a bad turn, skip the point, take up the preceding point. Let us say you take it from 2. So once you are at 2, you are at this particular point, you have to move towards 5. You are making up a good turn. So if you are making up a good turn, take it. 5 is a good turn. Now, similarly, you have to move from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 0. Now, can you tell me which is a convex polygon? I would be love to see your answers in the chat box. I hope anyone can chat. Yeah. Can you tell me what could be a convex polygon? 0 to 1, 1 to 2. Anyone from the audience? 1, 2, 5, 6. No? 1, 2, 5, 6. No? What is a polygon? The starting point should end up with the first point. You have to start from 0. From this point, 0. So 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 0. No, point number 7 has not been included. Yeah, anyone else? Anyone else? 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 0. No. Now see, once you are at 5, you are moving towards 6. It's a good turn. From 6, you have to still move towards 7. Now, once you are at 6, you are moving towards 7. That is a right turn. It's a bad turn. Skip this. Take up the preceding point. Means move from 5 to 7. So once you are moving from 5 to 7, it is again a bad turn. Skip it. Take up the previous point. You are at 2. So once you are at 2, you are over here. You have to move towards 7. It's a good turn. From 7 to 0, it is again a good turn. So what is your convex polygon? 0, 1, 2, 7, 0. Fine. Now you take any 2 points within the polygon. This point, and join them with a straight line. It is lying inside the polygon. Take any 2 points, 1 point, 2 point, join them with a straight line. The whole of the line is lying inside the polygon. But if you take up a polygon like this, 1 point, 2 point, line is lying inside the polygon. 1 point, 2 point, half of the line is lying outside the polygon. So this is not a convex polygon. Convex polygon is this polygon. 0, 1, 2, 7, and 0. I hope you would have got it. Now what we have done is, from a point cloud data, we have found up a bound in which I have to fabricate that particular product. So we have designed up, as the topic is designing. So we have designed up the bound of the object in which I have to manufacture. You have just created up a boundary, but still you have not done the tessellation. That is the first and the foremost point. Now there are numerous amounts of points that are lying in this particular bound. What I have to do? I have to create up triangles. I have to do up the first approximation. Now for doing up the first approximation, we have something called as the Voronoi diagrams. Voronoi. Fine. Now let us say that you have created up a polygon like this. Fine. I have to do tessellation. I have to create triangles. You can create the triangles like this also. You can create up the triangles like this also. The same way, two ways of doing the triangulation of a bounded region. Should I go for first or should I go for second? Fine. There is again one methodology that is called as a Delaunay triangulation that says that which triangulation is a good triangulation. Fine. Now, what does that Delaunay triangulation say is that whenever there is plurality of triangles, whenever there is a plurality of triangles, there are multiple ways by which it can be triangulated. Now, how to do the triangulation? Then Delaunay gave up a method. Fine. Now, what does a Delaunay give up a method? He says that, let us say, this is one way of doing the triangulation. This is the second way of doing up the triangulation. Fine. Now, you have to go for that kind of a triangulation in which, first listen to my words, the circumscribed circle. So if I have this particular triangle, I have this particular triangle and I draw up a circumscribed circle. Now, what is a circumscribed circle? This is a circumscribed circle. Fine. The circle engulfs that particular triangle. The fourth point that is there, that is from a point cloud data, that fourth point should not lie inside the circumscribed. It should not lie within the bound of that particular circumscribed circle. Now, if you do its triangulation like this, what you see is that this is the fourth point of the triangulation, which is lying inside the circumscribed circle. This is not the right triangulation. Whereas if you do the circumscribed circle of triangulation number 2, the fourth point that is over here, that is lying outside the circumscribed circle. So this is the right triangulation that I'm going to have. So Delaunay test says that there should be no additional vertex inside the circle. So if there is no additional vertex that is lying inside the circle, now that kind of a triangulation, we call it as a Delaunay triangulation. That is the right triangulation. So if I have these two methodologies, I should go for one or two. I should go for this particular thing because the Delaunay triangulation methodology has been tested. Once you have tested it, let us say that you do up a triangulation like this. Many a times when we go for a 3D scan data, it is never so that you will get up the design in the first go. Fine. You may require up a second scan, third scan, reiterative scans are being required. So if there is a fourth point or a new point that has been introduced, now you can do the triangulation like this also. You can do the triangulation like this also. Which triangulation you should go? You should always go for a triangulation which is not giving you sliver triangles. Like if you go for this kind of a triangulation, if you look to angles over here, they're very, very acute. Fine. Now these kind of triangles are called as a sliver triangles. Now what happens is when you go for a sliver triangulation, the problem arises in the slicing. When the problem arises in the slicing, your part manufacturing will not at all be good, however good your machine is. So never go for a tessellation like this. Always go for a tessellation like this, which helps in the of the sliver triangles. So once you have done its triangulation using any particular solid modeler, using any particular point cloud data, you have created up a triangulation. The next step that I have to go for is the slicing methodology. Now, what happens over here in this particular slicing methodology is you are actually stacking 2D layers. One layer stacked over other, stacked over third, stacked over the fourth layer. Now, in this particular stacking of the layer, what you can see is that you have to create up a bound. Within that particular bound, you are actually filling up your material, this zigzag manner. So that depends upon whether your part is, you want to create up a hollow part, you want to create up a 100% dense part. So if you want to create up a hollow part, there will be no zigzag pattern. If you want to create up a dense part, it will be full of these zigzag patterns. That is called as an infill. Got it? So in this particular slicing, what you do is you create up. So if I have to create up this dome shaped object, it is actually stacking of certain rectangular. So if I'm creating up a cylinder, it is actually stacking of circles. If I'm creating up a cube, it is actually stacking of squares. Fine. So it is actually a 2D that has been stacked to get up a 3D. So you are actually creating up a 2D object on the bed of your part, and the stacking gives you a superimposition of a 3D object. So in this particular slicing, whenever you do this slicing, people say that additive manufacturing is a very highly accurate process. There is no other process that can give you a more accuracy than this. No, not at all. There are certain myths associated with additive manufacturing. Nowadays, people always say that go for additive manufacturing. Turbine blade, additive manufacturing. Fine. Aerospace component, additive manufacturing. No, there are certain inherent errors in the additive manufacturing which we never talk about. One inherent error is tessellation, because it is an approximation. The other error is called as the containment error. Now, what is that containment errors? Always, whenever you go for additive manufacturing, you always create up an oversized object or you create up an undersized object. It always requires certain post processing to get up the desired shape. Fine. So see, if your slicing are outside, you are creating up an oversized object. Your actual is this oval shaped object, but because of the stacking outside, you are creating up an oversized object. But if you're doing up it's the stacking inside, you are creating up an undersized object. So it also requires certain post processing. It also requires certain post processing. So this kind of the oversizing or an undersizing of the object is called as the containment problem. So this has to be reduced. How to reduce it? So there is where a designer comes up into picture. There is what a design or an intent of that particular designer has to play up a role. What is the orientation? Fine. Let us try to change up the orientation. Now there is a 360-degree orientation. Which orientation is going to play? That is all about a designer that is going to play up. So there are numerous methods of manufacturing the product. So I will be discussing one or two with you. Then I will open up this particular session for the doubts or for the open house discussions. So one particular methodology is called as a fused deposition modeling, FDM, more frequently used nowadays. The only reason for this is that the patent has gone up and you can fabricate this particular machine in less than 20,000, 30,000 or even 50,000. A good machine. Fine. So what happens over here is this material is in the form of spools, is in the form of wires, and those particular wires are being gone up through nozzles, which helps in melting up this particular material, and you are having up a liquid material which is being injected or extruded out of that particular nozzle. So the technique is extrusion, that is fabricating up your product. So now if you see to this particular product that is a half moon shape, there are two spools that are there. One spool is red spool and the other spool is a blue spool. Now, red spool is the spool which is used for fabricating the actual product, whereas the blue is the spool which is used for fabrication of the support structures. Fine. So wherever there is an overhang, so you cannot fabricate anything in air. You have to give it certain support from the ground. So if I'm fabricating up this particular profile over here, fine, I have to give up certain support from the beneath. Otherwise, you cannot fabricate it at the top. It will fall down on the ground. So there are two materials. One is used for fabrication of the actual product, and the other one is used for fabrication of the support structures. So there are numerous materials that are there. But primarily, we work with plastic-based objects. When we talk about the plastic-based objects, again, there is a huge domain open for me. I can go for ABS, I can go for PLA, I can go for nylon, I can go for any other kind of a plastic. So that will depend upon that what is going to be the melting head temperature. Fine. In general, the melting head temperature varies from 200 to 300 degrees centigrade, and whatever the most commonly used materials we use in FDM, they have a melting of 220 to 30 degrees centigrade. So they are being converted into a semi-molten paste that can be extruded out of the nozzle. Fine. So you actually move up your nozzle in an XY manner. Fine. You create up a square in an XY axis, and there is a Z axis which can move in an up and down manner. So there is what the stacking of these particular layers plays up the role. So in general, the material that we are using up in the FDM is of a PLA or an ABS based plastic having a uniform diameter throughout. So the spool is that we are using that has a uniform diameter of 1.75 mm standard dia, or sometimes 3 mm is also being used. The material is being extruded out, material is being deposited onto the platform. The platform moves in the negative Z axis, second layer is stacked, third layer is stacked, and your object is being ready. So first you define up the bound, and within that particular bound, you start doing up the infilling. Fine. So in this particular infilling, what we have is there are numerous terminologies that come up into existence. The first one is what is going to be this slice height, or we call it as a slice thickness. Now, if I'm stacking up 5 mm layers one over the other, the surface roughness is poor. But if I stack up 0.5 mm layer, surface roughness is going to be good. So there are two contradictory things always in the designer mind. First is surface roughness, and other is time to manufacture that particular product. Fine. So the layer of this particular slice is called as the slice thickness. The outermost profile, the width is called as a contour width. So material is being extruded out of the nozzle, it falls on the platform and then it spreads. Fine. So what is the width of this particular road? That is called as a contour width. Now inside, you fill it in the form of zigzag pattern that is called as a raster fill. Fine. So there are n number of process variables that we work on the FDM, depending upon the material, depending upon the specifications of your particular machine. What is the slice thickness, road width, extrusion temperature? There are certain machine specific parameters. What is nozzle dia, filament feed rate? What is the viscosity of the material? How those particular materials have bound against each other, what are the binder characteristics. So you have to play with numerous parameters to get up the desired product. So it is never so in a single go you will get up a product that is having 100% infill, having 100% dense part, no porosity, nothing. These all parameters have to be optimized depending upon the design. So there are different ways of filling up the product. So you can fill up that particular layer using a cross hatch pattern that is called as a raster fill. You can fill up this in concentric circles that is called as a contour fill. You can also fill it in the form of a raster plus a contour the filling can be of different shapes. You can develop up your own G codes to define up that what is going to be the infill of that particular thing. Now, I take up the last portion of this particular thing, that is how to select up the material of your prototype. Now, for that, there is a Maxwell approach that is there, Mueller's approach of the material selection. The first thing is just go for the prototype manufacturing, that what is going to be the actual product that I'm going to use. Right? in terms of surface finish, in terms of dimensional tolerances, that I have to select up the material for that particular prototype selection. So this is the 4-step methodology that Mueller has defined us. Mueller defined first thing is examining the actual service loading condition of your product, where your product is going to lie. So even if you are fabricating up your prototype, many a times that happens is that the prototype test is passed, but the product fails. Fine. So why is it so? There might be a condition that you are not actually going to use the actual service loading conditions in your prototype. The material is different. Fine. Your prototype is made up of steel, but the actual product is made up of, let us say, titanium. The service loading conditions were altogether different. So always try to select up the material of the prototype, which is having up the properties which are close to that of the actual product. So the first thing is examining the actual service loading conditions of the product. What is going to be my product? Where it is going to be subjected? What is the temperature that it is going to be subjected? Then identify the relevant mechanical properties that address the requirements. Fine. Like it should have a Young's modulus. Quantify it. Young's modulus should be 100 units. Poisson's ratio should be 0.5. Fine. So you have to quantify the relevant mechanical properties that addresses those particular requirements. So once you have addressed it, select up the material properties. I can get up Young's modulus of 100 units of steel also, of cast iron also, of this also. So make up a list of the materials. Fine. Let us say I make up a list of steel, cast iron, aluminium. These are all the materials which can be used for these all service loading conditions. Then select up a prototyping methodology. Fine. You are working with steel. You cannot draw up the wires of steel. You cannot have steel in the liquid form, but you can have steel in the form of powder. Select up which technique is going to be used for the manufacturing. So depending upon the material requirement, select up the RP process that is from this particular domain. Over here, just a sec. Yeah, over here. The material is available in the form of liquid. Go for SLS. Material is available in the form of powder. Go for SLA. Material is available in the form of sheets. Go for loam. So depending upon the material that has gone up through that Mueller's strategy, select up the process and then go for the additive manufacturing domain of those particular process. Just a minute. Yeah. Fine. The other technique that we have is, let us say when we go for metals, the most important technique that is there, that is called as a selective laser sintering, SLS. Now, what is there in this particular SLS? The material is in the form of powders. When the material is in the form of powders, I have to sinter it. I have to fuse those particular powders against each other. So how to fuse it? Selectively sinter. How to sinter? With the help of laser. So see, wherever this laser is being felling, the temperature is risen over there locally. There is a localized rise in temperature. With this localized rise in temperature, the powder fuse. So wherever this laser hits, the powders agglomerate against each other, form up a solid structure, the other powder remains as it is. So if I have to create up this particular dome-shaped object, I have to first spread up a very thin layer of the powder onto the bed, selectively sinter it, move my bed in the downward direction, then do the second sintering, third sintering, fourth sintering, stack these layers one over the other till this particular part is being fabricated. So there are numerous materials that you can use. starting from metals, from ceramics to even polymers, even a combination of these particular materials, you can do the selective laser sintering. So it can be pure component metals, or it can be metals amalgamated with certain ceramics, ceramides, metals amalgamated with certain polymers, alumide. Fine. So these are all the materials that are there. So whenever you do the sintering of these particular powders, because you are mixing metals with polymers, metals with ceramics, one will be having a low melting point, other will be having a high melting point. So it is not a solid state sintering that occurs over here, but it is a liquid phase sintering. So see, there are two materials, one is light gray and other is dark black. Fine. Dark black is a low melting point material. Light gray is a high melting point material. When the laser is going to strike, it is going to first melt up the low melting point material. See, the green colored portion, sorry, the black colored portion has melted and it has filled up the cavity. So it is actually liquid that is bringing up the powders against each other. So it is a liquid phase sintering. But because of this liquid phase sintering, there will be certain pores that have been created that can be infiltrated using any low melting point to give you a 100% dense part. So you move from loose powder to a green part to a brown part, and with the help of an infiltration, you can create up a dense or the finished components. So that is one of another way of fabricating up the prototype. Now with this, I open up the house for 5 minutes of discussion if there are any.
Yes, thank you, sir, for this session. We have a few questions in the Q&A section, and I'll just read it out for you, sir. Firstly, Dr. Pramod Kumar is asking that how precise is the physically built object as compared to the soft 3D model?
Can you just repeat up the question?
Yes, how precise is the physically built object as compared to the soft 3D model?
That depends upon the machine that you are using. But if you talk about an FDM and SLA, the variation between a soft model and an actual CAD model will be in microns only. It will not be in mm.
Okay, sir. So there is one more question that additive manufacturing is good for small parts, and how we can utilize this technique for larger parts.
You can utilize this technique for the larger parts. The only challenge that you have is, first is your build platform has to be wider, and how to maintain the uniformity on that particular larger sized bed. So if you can maintain up a uniform temperature on a larger sized bed, the same technique can be extrapolated to your larger sized object.
Okay, sir. We have another question, sir. It is the convex polynomial is better as help to achieve an optimal manufacturing process.
Convex.
Convex polynomial.
But I didn't get the question.
Convex polynomial.
Yeah.
Is it better as help to achieve an optimal manufacturing process?
Not in the optimal manufacturing product, but it's very differentiated together. The thing is, if you are going for a convex polygon, fine, the slicing is relatively easy as compared to going for a concave polygon. That is what I can answer it as of now.
Okay, sir. That is also, we don't have any more questions for now. And if any participant has any question, they can just drop an email at the DSC coordinator, and then we will be sharing the same with the concerned expert, right? Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable time and experience with us. Uh, Thank you, sir, for this very informative session.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
kindly.
you. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. You all may leave.